Hi, welcome. On this video, I'm going to be really comparing and contrasting as to, again, one of the central themes by way of what makes the system of training really, really different when you compare it to other systems out there, such as here, we're going to be talking about by way of Kevin Murdaugh and his quasi Caesar Milan method. Okay, and this whole issue about when I talk about influence and control. Okay, as core ingredients. Okay, how they reveal, how they change in relation to having the right conversation with your dog. So when I talk about the right conversation, okay, one of the central themes is the theme of the dog understanding intent. Okay, so understand that when even how you're moving, how you're interacting, is a big deal as it sets up the dog understanding intent. Okay, so this is part of, again, I talk about type of conversation. I talk about conversation, people think like verbal commands, and this is where even I talk about perceptions changing, and so therefore verbal commands, that association, how that's established through a process itself. Okay, it's understanding how everything aligns through a proper sequence. Okay, so for example, on my board and trains, the 2 week board and trains, you'll see certain things line up at certain times during that process. Okay, so verbal commands, you'll see typically day 12 of a 14-day process. I'm starting to verbalize by way of dog understanding again, both perceptions changing, but coming into agreement with those core ingredients by way of the right conversation happening. Okay, so this is all about relationship. And so again, when I talk about certain objection points, because again, this is going to get into, I'm going to do a couple of videos here for anyone who's wondering, because again, people watch my videos, they'll see tension on the leash, they'll see how I'm using the leash, and right away they'll have a objection. Okay, and this is where Murdaugh, you'll see on his videos, because here's the thing, he interlays a moment in this video. He actually puts one of my videos in here where I'm actually stopping during the walk and again being intentional, okay, with again the level of control that's revealing and changing. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that because that's his objection point. So again, when people wonder why it is that these trainers, like why they have a problem with what I'm doing, that's also what makes the system of training totally different. And their objection point is really one of the central core themes of the system. Okay, so the differences here, when you look at the differences between, because we'll talk about this whole loose leash thing again, and this whole thing with movement as well, because understand this is important. So anyone who's wondering about certain relational dynamics, okay, how they're being exploited, okay, the problem with appearances, I'm going to talk through this. Okay, I'm going to do a couple videos here. I'm going to talk through, and here's the great thing, everything I say, okay, you can put to the test, okay, yourself. Okay, you can put it to the test, and you can do your own little audit, okay, to see if what I'm saying is on point. Okay, I'll talk through this as we go through it because understand something here. There's nothing hidden. Yes, what I do is different in the way that and this is the thing. You're gonna see when I talk about learning theory, this whole thing about using treats, right away, how trainers are jumping in, that's a problem. Okay, understand this whole thing about what represents defines training once a relationship problem is underway. All this is why I keep talking about, I always go back to the parenting example because I'm going to use this here again in terms of certain moments. Okay, that's what's revealed when parental influence. I mentioned this on the other video, the difference between standing 20 feet away having a conversation and kind of knees touching having a conversation with a child by way again of your role. Okay, it's the same thing. Okay, it reveals. Okay, it changes. Okay, your role is absolutely critical. But also, when I talk about, because you're gonna hear it here when he's talking about certain devices. Okay, it's interesting if you really apply critical thinking and really consider what I'm saying on these videos, things will start to make sense. Okay, so the objection points that these trainers have are common. Understand that you'll see it through even through certain controversies. Okay, when they pile on, trainers pile on to certain controversies such as I talk about the bonker controversy. The other controversy is confusion over certain moments, right? What's these trainers have in common is they're all piling on. Okay, there's nothing, I talk about things differently in the sense of I wouldn't do that. Okay, whatever, say for the bonker. I mean, that's not something that you would do based again on what that represents in terms of intent. Okay, making sense to the dog. Okay, because all is about agreements, is about the dog making sense of your role and what comes through that role in terms of just like parental influence, what's expressed through that role, even defined through leashes. Okay, it's about dog making sense of everything, whether it's a crate, everything is about relationship. Understand that's really important to understand. Everything branches off of making sense to the dog. But, the thing about deceptive appearances, understand that movement, control, okay, will offer a false picture. Okay, just understand that. Once a dog already has control, this is why it's so deceptive. Dogs can look amazing in certain moments, even floating around your house. You're petting, you're hanging out with them, and they can have gained an incredible amount of control in the relationship. And you're blind to it at a certain point. You'll say, okay, there's clues here. There are certain moments that are happening. No, that's the truth. Okay, and then when you line it up, it's just like a parent lining things up when they're interacting with a child, certain moments where they're putting a demand on the child and the child's bad attitude really comes out. Okay, it's the same type of thing. Versus, oh, my child looks pretty good. They're playing their video games, they're doing what they want to do. That's not the truth. Okay, but see, the whole dog training world is focused on appearances a certain way, which lends to this problem that's happening with people getting blindsided. Bad things are happening. Relationship change isn't happening at the level you think that it is. All these things, even the objection points with these trainers who they don't want to understand. When I talk through this, why I spend the time. I'll talk through all this because what they do is they're trying to it's like edit, right? They're taking a little piece. This is what he did here. It takes a little piece of something out of context, right? He exploits, okay, the relational dynamics happening, and then he compares it to his picture, okay, of moving with the dog appearing a certain way, this loose leash thing, and that's a problem. Understand that's a deceptive thing that these trainers are doing, whether they're aware of it or not, doesn't matter. Okay, some of these trainers are so focused a certain way that, but then see that's the problem. The collateral damage this stuff because then guess what happens when you end up with a bad picture of change out of nowhere? Seems like it came out of nowhere, or the owner is like, guess what? Oh, there must be something wrong with the dog. It happens all the time. Doesn't matter. Again, you can put everything I say to the test here, okay, as I go through it. So here, let's play some of this video. Again, I'm gonna do a couple parts here to talk through all this in terms of a method, okay?
To be done when outside on a leash, and the halty for him was the best tool. We usually,
So here you see, and this is the thing, you'll see trainers, okay, and this is the thing about I talk about intent. Okay, when you put a dog on a leash and a collar and you're starting to again because you have a couple options here. Okay, you can bring a dog under a certain level of intentional control. This is the intent when I talk about the integrity of lining things up the right way. Okay, that's going to affect change, the right conversation, the integrity of how you're moving and how you're bringing that dog under intentional control is a big deal. Okay, it's a type of conversation. Okay, it's like when you watch my method, the say the one-step method, I'm doing a sequence. You'll see a very intentional sequence happen. Okay, so the dog understands, right? Okay, I understand what Dale's doing here. And then when influence control are expressed through that, my goal is I want the dog to come into agreement with that. But also one of the variable here is depending on the level of control the dog's holding in the relationship to begin with. Okay, I may, there's adjustments. Okay, but that integrity level is going to be defined. It's going to come together at a certain point during the process. Okay, it doesn't negate the fact that it's going to come together because it needs to come together, the right conversation. So understand it's very intentional with how it's done to avoid high challenge. Sometimes even if high challenge is going to happen, there's certain protocols as well. So a muzzle, but then also just being more considerate. Okay, in terms of you'll see it on my videos with how I'm slowing things down. I'm just because there's a working through part of it too. The dog needs to work through Think of it like a child that's like out of control, very, very selfish, and you just barrel into situation where and then you should expect high conflict. Okay, because number one is the child is out of control anyway, and number two is you need to, as a parent, you need to be kind of considering how you're going to do things in a smart way. But here's the problem here, okay? Because again, this is a perfect example. What's going on here in the dog training world is, and even in terms of parenting styles, is that you have people, and we build a whole culture of this where people are so permissive, and this whole thing about the deceptive nature of appearances is that you when you interlay that in terms of people's attitudes about and believing certain things, taking things out of context, they find comfort in that, and they're not even properly applying the appearance problem in terms of saying, well, is that a real picture? For example, you can engage in, say, the permissive parenting style, or you can engage in bribery, and you can motivate a response to happen. But ask yourself the question: if you do that, okay, does that alone determine whether or not the relationship's actually getting better? Just within the framework of responses, say with the child clean up the room, or is there more that needs to happen? And then you have to look at the actual parenting style. So understand here that they're at the social level, okay, appearances are very problematic. Okay, you have to connect all the dots properly. Otherwise, you come on the other side, and this is the thing that's happened in the dog training world. People aren't looking at outcomes properly. Okay, bad outcomes are happening all the time. Bad outcomes, bad outcomes, bad outcomes. And the trainers, what they're doing is, instead of auditing to say maybe there's something wrong here with these outcomes, we need to line this up. Maybe there's a something we're missing here in terms of the type of relational dynamics, in terms of at the social level, with the perceptions of dogs not changing based again on how we're applying this idea. I talk about those core ingredients being reconciled in a very specific way. See, that's the problem. They're not, and so the blame shifting has become normalized. Like trainers are, and you see it right here. Their objection points are actually at the point that makes all the difference. That's the critical point of everything. But they're not, because they're already focused on appearances a certain way, and they're not putting things in the context, or even in terms of control. The problem with control, giving a certain image of things, it's a false image. It's a false image of change in many cases. So here, pay attention to this language, because ask yourself the question. So when I talk about, because this will go on to that clip here where you'll see me with a dog stop during the walk, stopping movement, okay, and a certain reaction happening with the dog, okay, and versus here with here you hear him talk about, say if you're struggling with the leash, like things to make certain adjustments to make it work out, so to speak. We'll talk about that here in a
If I
second.
have a dog like him who's extremely reactive outside, I
So right here, he's talking about extremely reactive outside. Okay, so one of the problems here, again, when you get a reactive dog, okay, this whole thing about control, say through that leash, and how that ties into the relationship. Understand, this is where people talk about, well, I take my dog off the leash, the dog seems, it just goes away. You have that habit, like, why is the dog so reactive on the leash? You take the leash off, and the dog seems to stabilize or appear normal. I say, don't be deceived. Okay, the leash is a connection to the relationship through you. So it's tied in that way, not just at a physical level, but at a relational level. So when that dog is going ballistic on the leash, because everything that's happening, okay, it's like when you're unraveling your emotions, you're feeling, how that's being expressed through how you're reacting, that is like fuel to the fire. Okay, it creates that type of dynamic. You take the dog off leash, the dog seems better. Well, the dog isn't better. Okay, understand that the dog isn't better in terms of the relationship the dog has with you at all. It just seems that. See, just appearances. But a dog needs to be on the leash, okay, to work through that, okay, to be able for you. And again, I talk about how that works through, okay, the alignment of a proper process, with intercepting those moments, okay, in a way which the dog comes into agreement with. So here he's talking about, well, okay, the dog's very reactive, like what should you do? But he's not going to hear him say what you should do is this should needs to line up with the right conversation through getting the dog right beside you, getting dialed in properly, starting to intercept certain moments. That's not what he does. And that's an important point because what these trainers do is they take it the other way. It's like, let's get moving. Let's put a different, talk about, a halty. Let's put a device on the dog to gain some level of, of agreeableness. But that's a problem. You see, it's about context here. Movement. Because I'm going to talk about a story here of someone I helped over in the UK, and interesting, right? This whole thing about movement, because movement is not necessarily a good thing. Okay, this is the point I'm making when these trainers go on about loose leash and they want to get a flow going and want to get moving. That's the worst thing you could be doing because it's not about resolving. Okay, it's just about offering up a false picture many times. That's all it is. These trainers, because they don't want to slow it down and they want to line it up, because if they did, they'd have a problem. Because here's the thing: in the video, there's a video that's since gone. I can't find it, but it's really telling with Kevin Murdaugh. He's out in the street, he's trying to get control of a dog that's putting out a moderate level of control. But the more he's trying to adjust the collar, see, it's like control starting to happen on this dog. This dog is getting is getting pushy, is going into challenge, and he struggled the whole time. He could not. He was just discombobulating everything because it's not about lining things up properly. It's not about having the right conversation in a way in which you can line it up. Okay, his idea of things is different. So when that level of control starts to happen on the dog, things start to flame up. He's in trouble. Okay, basically, because you have to have a certain leash skill, a certain way of how you move that's going to make sense to the dog intent. A certain level of it's kinetic is what it is. You watch my videos, you'll see how I'm doing it. But if you have a different idea of how you approach things, like we got to get moving, got to get this loose leash going. See, it's a different picture you're trying to generate. It's not the right picture. It's a different picture. Okay, just understand that.
I will go to a leash and collar first. They were using a harness, and if the leash and collar just is not working, then I'll go to a halt.
See, so deletion caller is not where. What does that mean? Like, think about really apply critical thinking here about what I'm saying. Right? Generate, right? Start to generate problems for him. I'm certain, like, okay, this is like not working. Well, I need a different device to generate a response. That's the wrong way. That's why I talk about certain devices can generate a better physical response, like say a prong pinch collar, okay, or a halty. It doesn't mean it's the right tool at all because you can have a better physical response, but not a better relationship. Okay, all you're doing during that walk is that dog's responding to that device. This is about clarity by way, again, of communicating, have the right conversation, the ability to have that through the leash and collar in a way that's going to get me transfer over, transition you into a type of relationship where you move beyond devices. Okay, this leash. And the thing here with trainers, because you'll hear them go on about their whole objection about the leash. So when I talk about the leash, I'm saying it's a tool, it's a means to an end. But when he sees me with the leash, he keeps going on in a way that he makes it sound like you never get a dog off leash because they'll use his leash a certain way. He's using them in a way in which it's like barbaric and like they package. So what they're doing when you hear certain language of trainers, understand they're taking things out of context. They're being dishonest. Okay, because all they care about is you have to, if you do anything that is different, it's not about auditing that or looking at it a certain way or putting it to the test, which you can. It's about we have to tear that down or try to say something to make it seem. And for force free trainers, what do you think they do all the time? I mean, you go on their thing that's like inflammatory language, right? The type of out of context inflammatory language they throw around labels like abuse, and they'll just start to label because if I can get people to believe that you're a dog abuser, I don't have to talk to you. If and so when labels are used, it's usually used with the intent of shutting down the conversation. So I don't have to I don't have to respond. I'm not accountable. I can just, and Murdaugh's done this on videos of mine as well. He'll use those words like abuse and stuff. So he falls in the same category as other trainers because it's the same thing. This is how bad the dog training world is. So let's play some more of this.
Halty as a last resort, and the halty really was the right tool for Cooper.
So saying the Halti was no, it's not the right tool. Okay, the Halti is about control, physical control. Okay, this is about influence and control, being able to be expressed so that I can intercept certain moments. okay, taking the form of a nudge. You'll see that, okay, because that's about the role of influence. So an express state. So I get into this thing about being dialed in terms of a dog's state of mind, an express state. When a dog has control, you'll see that stinking thinking. You'll see them fixate. They're starting to, starting to, you just see it. Their heads just turning and pivoting. That's at investment level where you're fading out, okay, as the dog owner. So I'm going to stop this here, make this part one. I keep these within 20-minute segments, but this is important videos to go through here because if you're seeking answers beyond appearances, if you're looking for a real picture of change, you'll pay attention to what I'm saying. This system of training is an original source system. Okay, it's going to dial you in the right way. You're not going to be dealing with fake pictures here, and then things are going to make sense. This is why I talk to everyone. It's like why these trainers say certain things. Why aren't they willing to step back and ask certain questions? Because this is a proven system. Okay, this system, this is a complete system. All right. So, but here we're gonna go through because again, he puts in a clip of one of my dog, me standing there with one of my dogs. I want to talk about that because it's important. It's an important point. So stay tuned for part two.